Now, I am not going to add anything to the views of Lino and Robert on measuring and vulnerabilities and understanding resilience and all of that. We share these views. I'm rather going to explain to you what we try to do in the UN and with the permission of the High Representative. And we'll do that in a humble manner in his presence, of course. But of course, also remembering that UNCTAD has been a pioneer in this story. This is actually nearly 40 years. It will be 40 years, 2 years from now, that UNCTAD has been dealing with an entity that before SIDS was called Island Developing Countries. The smallness was injected in this jargon only in 94, I suppose in 92, as you yourself, Ambassador, will remember, toward the Barbados Conference. And that's when, from IDCs, Island Developing Countries, we moved into small island developing states. Different acronym, different jargon, but by and large, the same countries. So it's nearly four decades of history for UNCTAD, and presumably maybe 2 years from now we will have something that will, something a bit visible to commemorate this. But back to the subject now. What I would like to explain to you now is that we think that after all this work, all these years, we still have a lot of homework to do. And this is an additional reason why we must speak in a humble manner, because frankly, there is still much to do, including within the UN itself. Let me recall something fairly extraordinary that happened last month. Not extraordinary to the public in general, but within our circles in the UN, it is not unnoticed. Last month, the Committee for Development Policy met in March. That was in March. That's the group of experts, independent experts, that every 3 years review the list of least developed countries. As you will know, about 8 countries are on the list of LDCs are SIDS. In other words, 8 LDCs are also small island developing states. And usually in this kind of session by the committee, the CDP as we call it, the most burning issues, the most particularly the main focus will be on potential cases of graduation from LDC status. And that is an interesting subject for SIDS because most of the graduation cases so far have been SIDS. Now, the extraordinary thing that happened last month is that, much to our astonishment, the CDP recommended, among other things, that Tuvalu be graduated from LDC status. You heard me, Tuvalu. Not Singapore, huh? Tuvalu. Okay, so I don't know how many of you have been to Tuvalu. But if there is one country that is extreme by any definition when it comes to vulnerability, that's got to be Tuvalu. And I would probably say the same thing about Kiribati. But that was about Tuvalu. So now we have this group of experts. After the wealth of information that we've been giving to them about the handicaps and the constraints, vulnerabilities of these countries, and particularly that country, ourselves, UNCTAD, producing vulnerability profiles, and that's been several times, over the years, in addition to what we say orally to them, because we are observers in the CDP, in addition to what Tuvalu itself said, with a minister and a delegation coming, especially at their expense, by the way, from Tuvalu to explain that they need maximum concessionary treatment because of what they are. In other words, a country completely dependent on unpredictable, uncontrollable sources of income. A country with no productive capacity, depending on remittances and aid, in addition to internet domain name revenue and perhaps, I don't know, maybe philatelic sales, etc., but no exports, for example, no exports. So why is it that they still want to graduate Tuvalu? Because after all these years, after all that has been said, they are still blinded by per capita income. And that's the island paradox, madam, that you were alluding to. I mean, how come after all these years, after 2 global conferences on SIDS, after an inflation of reports and resolutions and all the things, all the events, not to mention the number of lovely events, wonderful events that have taken place, Lino's work and all of that, we still have a bunch of people who, in an act of astonishing blindness, will decide that Tuvalu is ready for graduation. In other words, you can imagine the signal given to the international community in the year of Rio +20. after Mauritius +5 and all of that. So obviously, ECOSOC, which is, by the way, the body to which CDP reports, clearly is not going to graduate to value, because members will be smarter. They will know that would be an outcry, if the world was going to graduate to value from LDC status. So the decision, there is nothing to fear. Tuvalu will continue to receive maximum treatment because ECOSOC will not graduate it. In the end, the loser will be the CDP itself, which is not a problem. But this is to illustrate the problem, that we have in the UN, is that we keep explaining, making efforts to explain the handicaps and the vulnerabilities, but it doesn't register. It simply doesn't come across. We still have this kind of decision-making in the UN. And this is just less than a month ago what I'm reporting here. So now back to resilience. Without going into skilled presentations, look at this on the screen. You have a bar chart here showing the situation of various groups of countries in the light of the UN Economic Vulnerability Index. And that is, by the way, the index that we use out of loyalty, but also because we think that it's a good index, as much as we also appreciate other indices. But the two bars that matter here, because we want to be quick as possible, is the central one, the red one, and the brown one at the right. This shows, and this is enough for us, to convince us that SIDS are more vulnerable than non-SIDS. It's as simple as that. And as you can see here, it's by 33%. Never mind the figures, but by a significant margin, SIDS, as far as we are concerned, are more vulnerable economically than countries, I should say, developing countries other than SIDS. Now, and this, of course, this justifies the title of this chart. Now, the crux of the matter for us here is that resilience building, obviously being the paramount objective, that's the raison d'être of our work on SIDS, naturally, we will say, first of all, that resilience building is a responsibility of SIDS themselves. They, of course, have to do what is necessary for that in terms of policy making and policy choices, etc. But they also require a large amount, most of them, almost all of them, really need a good amount of external support, and particularly what we would call special treatment. Special treatment is, of course, very much a Geneva notion, because particularly preferential trade was, of course, a notion that was cultivated by UNCTAD originally, and of course, this is also where the World Trade Organization is. So special treatment is really something we believe in, and there is still need for it. And when you talk about special treatment, there is obviously a context where you would have concessions that will have to be granted by development partners with target beneficiaries, a number of beneficiaries that will have to be, of course, targeted, and for which the concessions that we are talking about will be reserved. In other words, for example, SIDS-specific concessions, SIDS-specific special treatment. For that to be possible, there will need to be clarity in the group of beneficiaries. We will know, we will need to know exactly who the beneficiaries ought to be in this picture. Otherwise, if there is no clarity, there will not be any special treatment, because no development partner will take the target seriously. So hence the importance of having a category that is defined, hence the importance of having criteria. It's another debate. I don't think we are going to go into that debate. But our effort in UNCTAD is really basically two streams of efforts, two lines of work, if I may say. First of all, identifying a number of international support measures that really will help SIDS building resilience, and that is in terms of preferential market access, in terms of development financing, a bit more concessionary than what they have, particularly when they tend to have a high per capita income. And thirdly, last but not least, technical assistance. There is a wide range of areas of technical assistance in which they need, really, which the SIDS need. And those are areas, those are forms of help and assistance that could be brought to them, because there is competence, there is knowledge that could be delivered, and also at a reasonable cost. So all of these, a whole reflection, which is ongoing, on international support measures for seeds. And I repeat, the aim will be to have that for seeds only. Of course, seeds do receive things already. There is special treatment. In fact, the landscape of special treatment is quite complex. That is what appears on the screen at the moment. I'm going to almost skip it, go through it very quickly because of the time constraint. But you have these two bars here. The central one is about LDC treatment, and the right one is on other treatments. Because among the seeds, as we said earlier, we have a few LDCs and a few non-LDCs. As a matter of fact, most seeds are non-LDCs. Okay? So if you take any seeds, it's a large number of special areas of concession, special treatments that country will receive. If the country is an LDC, there will be market access. There will be, of course, concessions in the WTO for LDCs that is well known. There will be particular attention from donors in terms of development financing. There will be a good amount of technical assistance, etc. But if you look at those that are non-LDCs, and that's about 2/3 of the seeds, and most seeds are there is no such thing as LDC treatment for them, but there are other forms of treatment that are appreciated, obviously, and useful, in terms of market access and development financing. All of these I have to skip almost because it's too long, but overall, it gives a sort of a complex pattern of special treatments. But the problem, essentially the message here is, among these various forms of concessions, none of them is seed-specific. None of them is seed-specific, because for it to be seed-specific, there will have to be seed status. Just the same way there is LDC status. But there is no such thing as seed status, because seeds is not defined. The category is an implicit category, and that is where the problem is. It could be remedied, more could be done to, some kind of progress is underway, but there is still much work to do. So this is probably where I'm going to stop, because essentially the message was really that there is still much work to do, and the work. If there was one word to remember, I suppose that would be credibility. Because when you talk about a category, there ought to be clarity, which is the sine qua non for credibility. We are not quite there yet. And that is the reason why we in UNCTAD, among others, but particularly in UNCTAD, think that there is still much work to do, including toward the next SIDS conference. But before that, we will have a few things, particularly next year with the work of the CDP, as requested by ECOSOC, to hopefully come up with a set of criteria so that we have a credible list of SIDS and hopefully a bit more credibility so that development partners could take SIDS more seriously. Thank you very much for your patience.